Did you ever get blamed for something you didn't do, just because you were easy to blame?
It's strange how you can feel something crack inside you and still smile like nothing happened. That's exactly what I did, smiled through my teeth while the clinking of wine glasses still echoed around the patio, and everyone turned toward Megan, as if she were the Virgin Mary herself. My baby shower was almost over, sun hanging low over my mother's backyard, the decorations sagging just a little in the humidity. We had cupcakes with little plastic rattles stuck in the frosting, a balloon arch over the back gate, and a table full of half-open gifts, onesies, diaper cakes, soft toys with tags still flapping. All of it had been a warm, slow blur until Megan stood up in her ivory dress, holding her glass like she was hosting the Oscars, and clinked it just loud enough to hush the laughter. She waited until everyone was looking. Then, in that poised, breathy voice of hers, she said, "I just found out, I'm having twins," and let the words hang in the summer air like she was dropping diamonds. I don't remember the exact second my stomach turned, but I do remember the pitch of the squeals from around the patio, the gasps and fluttering hands, and someone yelling double blessing, like we were all in a goddamn Hallmark movie. She didn't look at me right away. Megan's eyes scanned the crowd like she was drinking in the applause, and when they finally landed on mine, she smiled, not like a sister, not like someone sharing joy, but like a queen, like a woman who just stole the crown and dared me to say something about it. I stood up, walked over, and hugged her. Not because I wanted to, but because every eye in the room was waiting to see what I'd do. I wrapped my arms around her and squeezed just enough to make sure she could feel that my smile wasn't real. She whispered something into my ear then, something so light and sugary it almost didn't register at first. "Don't worry, Danny. They'll still love your little one too." Then she leaned back, gave me that practiced grin that's been part of her since high school, and kissed the air beside my cheek like we were on a reality show. Let me be clear, I'm not mad she's pregnant. I'm not mad she's having twins, or that she shared the news. But timing is everything, and Megan has a gift for choosing her moments in ways that feel like a paper cut, small, sharp, and somehow more painful because you know no one else sees it happening. And that's her talent, really. She doesn't throw punches. She throws smiles that slice. She doesn't compete openly. She performs innocence like a damn Broadway star. And she's been doing it my entire life. When we were kids, it was little things. If I got a new dress, she suddenly had a matching one the next day, just a little prettier, just a little tighter, just a little more expensive. If I brought home a painting from art class, Megan would casually mention that her teacher said she had real talent. It was always a game of one-up, but it was dressed up in compliments and passive little digs that left me questioning if I was imagining it. Over the years, I learned to pick my battles. I let her have the spotlight more often than not, because pushing back just made me look bitter. But something about this moment, her standing there, hijacking a day that was meant for my child's future, just to drop her news and soak in the applause, lit something in me that I hadn't felt in years. After the cake was cut and most of the guests started leaving, Megan came up to me, pretending to help clean up. She grabbed a stack of napkins, fluffed them a little, and said, "I hope you don't think I was trying to steal your thunder or anything." I turned to her slowly, smiled, and said, "Of course not, Megan. I know you wouldn't do that." And for a split second, I think she actually believed me. But I was already counting down the hours. Because this time, I wasn't just going to smile and let it slide. See, what no one at the party knew, not even Megan, was that Kyle and I had just closed on a new house 2 days ago. A gorgeous colonial with a wraparound porch and a backyard big enough for swing sets and birthday parties. We hadn't told anyone yet. Not even my mom. We were waiting for the shower to be over to announce it quietly, maybe with a photo. But as I stood there watching Megan laugh with a group of friends, rubbing her still flat stomach and soaking up the praise, I made a decision I didn't even fully understand at the time. This wasn't about the twins. It wasn't about the toast. It was about years of being the side character in my own damn life. And if Megan wanted a stage so badly, she could have it, but she wasn't going to like what came next. The next morning, Kyle and I stood on our new porch with coffee mugs in hand and sunlight warming the railing. He asked me if I was okay. I nodded. I was more than okay. I had something I'd never had before when it came to my sister leverage. Not spite, not jealousy. Just quiet, deliberate power. We hung the nameplate beside the door right after breakfast. It wasn't anything dramatic, just simple wood, carved in neat script. The Anders family. EST 2024. We didn't tag anyone. No captions with hints or emojis. Just the house, the plate, and the door, posted with perfect, casual timing. Within 4 hours, Megan had called 3 times. By noon, she was crying. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty. Not one bit. I didn't plan to hurt her. But some wounds open all by themselves when people finally see what they thought belonged to them was never theirs to begin with. People like to say, "Oh, but she's your sister," as if that's supposed to make everything easier to forgive, as if blood somehow washes away years of subtle humiliations and quiet thefts dressed up as coincidences, as if a shared childhood absolves someone from all the ways they slowly chipped away at your sense of self, all while pretending to hand you support. But what they don't realize, what they never see, is that family wounds don't come from weapons. They come from the smallest, most precise emotional cuts, delivered so softly you start to wonder if maybe you're the problem for bleeding. After Megan's big twin bomb at the shower, I couldn't stop replaying that moment in my head, not because of what she said, but because of how she said it, with that polished confidence that comes from knowing people will always root for you, even when you're doing something cruel dressed up as sweet. And the worst part? She's always been that way. This wasn't new. This was just the first time I'd finally let myself feel it without filtering the emotion through guilt or that exhausting need to be the bigger person, which, in our family, always meant shutting up and swallowing it. That night, after the last plate was scraped and stacked in the kitchen sink, after the hugs and polite goodbyes, after Megan left with her perfectly neutral expression and her husband trailing behind her like a loyal accessory, I sat in the bedroom with Kyle. My feet swollen, my body aching, and that taste of bitterness still clinging to my throat like I'd swallowed something I wasn't meant to digest. He didn't say much at first. He rarely does. Kyle isn't a talker, but he's a watcher. And sometimes that's more important. He asked me how I felt, and I just shook my head, because how do you even put something like that into words without sounding like the villain? How do you explain the feeling of being hijacked by someone who calls you sis, while pulling the rug out from under you again and again and again? I told him I was fine, but he looked at me the way people look at something cracked, something that's been pretending to be whole for too long. "I think she did it on purpose," I said finally, and it sounded childish coming out of my mouth, like I was 13 again, telling on the golden child. But Kyle didn't laugh. He just nodded and said, "Of course she did." And it was such a simple, quiet affirmation that something in me relaxed, like I didn't have to justify the years of second place anymore. The thing about Megan is, she doesn't need to lie to win. She just shifts the story so subtly that truth bends around her like it's trying to impress her. I remember once, in high school, she borrowed my prom dress 2 days before the dance. She claimed it was an emergency, that her zipper broke, that she didn't have time to shop, and she wore it, looked stunning, posed for pictures, and made sure everyone knew it was technically Danielle's, but she said I could. I didn't say she could. But by the time it got back to me, the dress was stretched out, reeking of her perfume, and the damage had already been done, both to the fabric and to my ability to speak up for myself. Years later, she did it again with Kyle, though neither of them fully knew it at the time. Back when Kyle and I first met, before we were even a thing, Megan got wind that he was interested. She called him up, invited him to coffee, and casually mentioned that "Danny really likes you, just thought you should know." The whole thing was under the guise of sisterly matchmaking, but it was a test. She wanted to see if he'd look at her instead. And maybe he did, just for a second. She's beautiful, I won't lie. But Kyle, bless him, saw right through it. He told me later that something about the way she framed it made him feel like a chess piece in some private game he didn't want to play. "I think you've let her win for too long," he said that night, as we sat on the floor of our room, surrounded by unopened gift bags and bows that had already started to wilt. "You're always 5 steps behind because you're too busy pretending you don't care when she pulls this crap." I wanted to argue. I wanted to say, It's not a game. But the truth is, it is a game. It always has been. And I've been playing it with one hand tied behind my back because I was too scared to be called bitter. But this time, we had something she didn't know about. Our house. Our future. Our quiet little plan to build something away from all that noise. We had signed the papers just 2 days before the baby shower. A modest 2-story place with a white porch and a view of the lake if you stood on the upstairs balcony. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours. And I hadn't told a soul. Not even Mom. Especially not Mom, because even though she means well, her mouth tends to open at the worst times, especially when Megan's involved. We'd been planning to post the photo the following week after the baby shower dust settled. Nothing dramatic. Just a little picture of us holding the keys, maybe a caption about nesting. But now, I wanted the reveal to be clean. Surgical. No announcement, no speech, no grandstanding. Just a picture. One image with the nameplate we had custom-made, the Anders family, EST 2024. Simple. Quiet. Devastating. And somewhere deep down, in the space where all those years of second place had built up like sediment, I knew Megan would see it, not just the house, but the message beneath it. That something had finally slipped from her fingers without her permission. That this time, she didn't get to make the moment hers. Have you ever had a family member who couldn't let you have even one moment of joy without turning it into their own performance? Have you ever smiled through your teeth just to keep the peace, only to realize peace was never the goal, it was just survival? Tell me, was it wrong for me to finally want my own spotlight, even if it came with shadows? Because if you ask me, that photo wasn't a revenge post. It was a mirror. And she wasn't ready to look. It's a strange kind of power, the silent kind, the kind that doesn't make a sound when it lands, but still echoes for days afterward like thunder under the skin. And when Kyle and I posted that photo, the one with the new porch, the morning light slanting across the steps, and the freshly mounted nameplate on the front post, it felt like we'd finally said something without having to say anything at all, like a message tucked in plain sight, polite on the outside, but sharp as a razor if you knew where to look. The morning we took that picture, I remember feeling oddly calm, a kind of quiet, humming anticipation like the seconds before a big storm, not nervous or panicked, but wide awake in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. Because deep down I knew we were pushing the first domino on something that had been standing too long, something too careful, too curated, and entirely too overdue for collapse. The house itself wasn't flashy or oversized. It wasn't some grand architectural statement or a competitive flex the way Megan might have chosen a home, had she been the one closing on it first. No, it was warm and slightly weathered, a little fixer-upper charm with painted shutters and a swing that creaked gently even when there wasn't wind. The kind of place you picture when you imagine backyard birthdays and tired Christmas mornings and dinner leftovers reheated in mismatched bowls. It had character, not magazine cover perfection, but the kind of presence that speaks of permanence, of intention, of roots finally being planted after years of being stuck in other people's shade. The nameplate was Kyle's idea, and I still don't know if he meant it to be a trigger or just a sweet gesture, but either way, it worked. It was handmade by a local craftsman, carved from a reclaimed piece of barn wood, the letters painted black against the natural grain, and it read, "The Anders family, EST 2024. That's it. No emojis, no baby shoes dangling from a ribbon, no ultrasound photo tucked into the corner of the frame. Just a name, a date, and a message. We are building something here, and we did it on our terms." When we posted the photo, just the house, no faces, no explanation, neither of us expected the reaction to come as fast or as loud as it did. Kyle, being who he is, didn't even turn his phone on until lunch. I, on the other hand, sat on the floor of the empty nursery with my laptop and a mug of cold tea, watching the likes tick upward with the eerie inevitability of a pot boiling over. The comments came in soft at first, neighbors congratulating us, old college friends double-tapping with heart-eyed emojis, even my mom chiming in with a cheerful, "So happy for you both." But the message that hit hardest didn't arrive until later that morning, and it didn't come in a comment or a text, it came in a phone call, and it was Megan. She didn't say hello when I answered, Didn't even greet me like a sister should after seeing something that monumental posted without warning. She went straight into it, voice tight, brittle like glass under pressure, and she said, "You knew, didn't you? You knew we wanted that house." I remember blinking, the silence stretching between us, and not because I didn't know what to say, but because I did, and I needed her to hear every inch of that silence before I broke it. At first, I played dumb. I told her we'd been house hunting for months, which was true, and that we simply fell in love with this place after seeing it one weekend. I said we didn't know they had put in an offer, which, technically, wasn't a lie. I didn't know, not until after Kyle had heard Megan talking about it at that barbecue 3 months ago. But I let the half-truth hang there because I wanted her to squirm in that uncertainty, to feel the same powerless disbelief I had felt every time she stole a moment from me and turned it into a stage for herself. She didn't believe me, not really, and I could hear it in the way her voice cracked, in the way she said "unbelievable" under her breath, like she was trying to decide if she was more hurt or more humiliated. The idea that I, the little sister who always backed down, who always played it safe, had beaten her to something she believed was already hers, that rattled her in a way I had never seen before. And that's the part no one talks about, how entitlement masks itself as hurt, how people cry when their illusions of control slip through their fingers, how disappointment morphs into moral outrage when the thing they wanted gets taken without them ever realizing it wasn't promised to them in the first place. Megan started crying somewhere in the middle of the call, not the dramatic sobs she used to fake in high school when she got caught skipping class, but that shaky, breathless kind of crying that comes from deep embarrassment, the kind that seeps through clenched teeth and makes your throat burn. She asked me, voice cracking like wet paper, "Why would you do this to me?" And for a second, I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because the question itself was so absurd. As if she couldn't imagine a world where someone else got to choose first. As if I had stabbed her in the back, not simply walked through a door she assumed I wouldn't reach before her. I told her, with as much calm as I could muster, that it wasn't about her, that we found a home we loved, and we made a choice that made sense for our family. But between every word I spoke, there was another sentence I didn't say. "You've taken enough from me, Megan. This one, you don't get to take." By the time I hung up, she was still sniffling, still trying to piece together how the story had slipped from her hands. And I won't lie, there was a part of me, a dark, tired, weathered part that had spent too long making room for her spotlight, that finally felt a kind of peace. Not triumph, not revenge, just peace. Because in that moment, with my baby's crib still unbuilt in the room beside me, and the scent of fresh paint lingering in the hallway, I knew that this wasn't just a win. It was a shift. And for the first time in a very long time, I was no longer standing in her shadow. I was standing on my own porch, in my own house, with my own damn name on the wall. Some people think it's the big betrayals that split families in half, the cheating, the stealing, the outright lies, but more often, what really does the damage are the quieter, unspoken fractures that build over time, those tiny decisions, remarks, and gestures that don't seem like much on their own but eventually form a pattern too deep to ignore, too familiar to be innocent. And when Megan stood outside my front door just 48 hours after sobbing over the phone, her mascara smudged beneath her eyes and her mouth pinched in a way that made her look less like my sister and more like a woman who just realized the world wasn't revolving around her anymore, I knew we'd reached the place there was no walking back from. Not with apologies, not with explanations, not even with the kind of fake family dinners where everyone pretends to forget what happened. I wasn't surprised to see her on the porch, but I was surprised she came alone, no Brad, no daughter, no backup, which told me one of two things. Either she didn't want witnesses for what she was about to say, or she'd finally figured out this wasn't a conversation she could win with charm and group sympathy. She didn't knock. She just stood there, staring at the nameplate as if it were a mirror showing her something she didn't want to believe, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. When I opened the door, I didn't invite her in. Not out of cruelty, but because I knew she wasn't here to see the house. She was here to confront the thing she couldn't say out loud, that for the first time, I had done something she couldn't undo, outshine, or reframe into a version that made her the hero. She started off with a soft voice, the kind you use when you're trying to sound calm while boiling inside, and she said, "I need to understand how this happened," as if I had stolen the deed from under her pillow. I told her the truth, or at least a version of it, that Kyle and I had been looking for months, that we fell in love with this place as soon as we saw it, that we had no idea she had any interest in it until she accused me of taking it. But Megan isn't stupid, and she knows me better than most people do, which means she could hear the weight behind what I didn't say. And what I didn't say was this: yes, I knew. I knew she and Brad had toured the house in the spring. I knew they had submitted an offer that didn't go through. I knew they had been hoping the sellers would come back to them after the first deal fell apart. And yes, I knew all of that because Kyle told me quietly, without drama, after he overheard Megan talking about it during our cousin's engagement party in May, casually bragging to a group of women about how they'd found the one, how it was just a matter of time, and how this little place on Pineview was going to be our forever home. At the time, I hadn't thought much of it. I hadn't even known which house she meant. But when we walked through it weeks later and I saw the layout, the renovated kitchen, the clawfoot tub, the exact blue-gray paint on the front door that Megan once pinned to her dream house board on Pinterest, I felt something cold and electric run through me. I told Kyle. He waited. I said, "Should we walk away?" And he said, without hesitation, "Why would we?" And that, more than anything, was the moment that shifted everything for me. Not the house, not the nameplate, but the quiet certainty in his voice when he reminded me that I was allowed to choose what I wanted without apologizing for someone else's expectations. So no, I didn't steal the house. I claimed something Megan had only imagined as hers, something she assumed would land in her lap by default, because in her world, things are supposed to fall into place as long as she's at the center of the story. She couldn't accept that this time, someone else wrote the ending before she even realized the chapter had started. She didn't stay long. Her voice cracked when she said, "You don't even like this neighborhood," which was almost funny, because I actually love it. Quiet streets, older homes, no HOA board breathing down your neck. But Megan wasn't really talking about sidewalks and school districts. She was talking about identity, about the idea that if this was supposed to be her dream, then what the hell was I doing living it? As she turned to leave, she muttered something under her breath, too low to hear, but the way she clenched her fists at her sides told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't just hurt. She was humiliated. And people like Megan don't forget humiliation, especially when it's dealt not with a slap, but with a smile and a silent doorframe. Later that night, when the sun had dipped behind the trees and the shadows of our porch lights stretched across the yard like arms reaching back into the past, Brad showed up. I wasn't expecting him. Kyle wasn't even home, but there he was, standing on the very same step Megan had sulked on hours earlier, holding his car keys like they weighed more than they should. He looked tired, like a man who had just spent 2 straight days trying to calm a storm that wasn't even his to contain, and he didn't waste time on greetings. He just looked me in the eyes and said, "You win." I didn't say anything. And then he added, quieter this time, "But you might have broken her." He walked away before I could reply, and I didn't follow him, because the truth is, I wasn't sure what I would have said. Maybe he was right. Maybe I did break something. But if I did, it was something that had already been cracked for years, something brittle, something unearned, something that had always assumed it was safe from consequence. And maybe, just maybe, it was time it finally shattered. There's something deeply unsettling about the silence that follows the kind of emotional explosion no one is willing to acknowledge out loud, the way families quietly retreat into their corners after the dust settles. Each person nursing their own version of the truth like a bruise they swear isn't there, and in the weeks that followed the house incident, after Megan's tears, after Brad's quiet visit, after my mother's awkward, too cheerful phone call asking if we were all getting along again, there was a stillness that didn't feel like peace so much as the eerie quiet you get just before another storm rolls in, and I think, deep down, I always knew we weren't done yet, that there was still one more curtain waiting to fall. One more truth waiting to slip out when no one was watching. I had the baby 2 weeks early. Labor came fast, without warning, in the middle of the night while Kyle was brushing his teeth and I was sitting on the edge of the bed, rubbing lotion into my legs and staring at my feet like they were someone else's. We barely made it to the hospital in time, and by the time they wheeled me into delivery, I was shaking, not from fear, but from the sheer velocity of it all, like my body had decided it was done waiting for the rest of my life to catch up. And when I finally held my daughter in my arms, when I felt that impossibly small weight on my chest and saw her face for the first time, it was like everything else, the drama, the rivalry, the house, Megan, just drained from my body and left behind a kind of sacred exhaustion I hadn't known I was capable of feeling. For 3 days, I didn't check my phone. Kyle handled the texts, the calls, the congratulations. My mother came by, teared up appropriately, and brought her famous sugar cookies, as if that was going to smooth over the way she'd so obviously pit us against each other our whole lives under the guise of celebrating differences. Megan didn't visit. She didn't call. But on the 4th day, a small box arrived at the nurse's station with my name on it. No card, no return address, just careful handwriting and a postage sticker from Megan's neighborhood. Inside was a single baby onesie, ivory cotton with delicate stitching on the front that read Little Miss Miracle. There was no note, no explanation, just that tiny piece of fabric, carefully folded and smelling faintly of her perfume. At first, I thought it was sweet, restrained, but sweet. But then I realized something that made my breath catch in my throat like a fishhook. It was just one onesie. One. No mention of twins. No, for the girls, or can't wait for our babies to grow up together. And suddenly, something about the fabric felt stiff in my hand, like it wasn't a gift at all, but a message wrapped in cotton. A few hours later, as I nursed my daughter with the hospital TV murmuring in the background, I got a text from a friend, Sarah, someone Megan used to work with before her company went remote. A friend who didn't know all the family politics, but always had a sharp instinct for bullshit when she saw it. Her message was blunt, so, Megan's not actually having twins. Just that. A question dressed up as a statement, casual enough to feel like gossip, but pointed enough to hit me straight in the gut. I stared at the screen for a long time, my thumb hovering over the keyboard, trying to decide if I wanted to know what I already suspected. When I finally asked her what she meant, Sarah replied with a screenshot, a post Megan had liked and then quickly unliked, a comment thread where someone congratulated her on her one baby on the way, and Megan had replied with a row of pink hearts and a vague, "We are so excited for our little girl." No twin emoji. No mention of two. No clarification. Just one baby. One truth finally slipping through the cracks. I didn't tell Kyle right away. I needed a minute to sit with it, to let the weight of that realization settle into my bones, because as petty as it might sound, the confirmation that she had lied, not exaggerated, not miscommunicated, but deliberately fabricated something so deeply personal, cut through me in a way I wasn't prepared for. She had made up a pregnancy detail at my baby shower. She had stood up, clinked her glass, smiled like a queen, and announced something that wasn't even real, just so she could hijack the attention one more time, just so she could keep her position at the center of a story that was never hers to begin with. And the worst part wasn't even the lie, it was that I believed her. I hugged her. I swallowed my frustration and smiled, because I didn't want to ruin her moment. I gave her grace she didn't earn, and now, holding my real child in my arms, I finally saw the pattern for what it was, a lifetime of me stepping back while she took whatever space she wanted, regardless of whether it was hers to claim. Later that night, after the nurses had dimmed the lights and the floor had quieted to the soft shuffle of carts and slippers, I told Kyle everything. He didn't react with shock. He didn't gasp or shake his head. He just let out a long breath, rubbed his hand across his jaw, and said, "She never expected you to call her bluff." And he was right. Because people like Megan build their thrones on the assumption that no one will ever challenge the foundation, that the rest of us will keep smiling, keep nodding, keep playing along. We didn't send her a birth announcement. We didn't post a newborn photo until we were home, settled, surrounded by silence and the sweet chaos of new parenthood. And when we finally did, it was one photo, black and white, soft light, my daughter's hand wrapped around my pinky finger, with a caption that simply said, "She came early. She came loud. She came ours." Megan didn't comment. She didn't call. But 2 days later, I saw she had unfollowed me on Instagram, which I imagine, in her world, is the equivalent of throwing a drink in someone's face. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel smug. What I felt was clean. Finally. Like I'd been carrying around a weight I didn't know was optional, and now it had quietly slid off my shoulders, leaving behind space I didn't know I was allowed to claim. As I rocked my daughter on our porch 1 week later, the wind soft and warm and brushing against the wooden nameplate like it was whispering secrets only I could hear, I realized something I hadn't let myself admit until then. This wasn't about revenge. Not really. It wasn't about winning or stealing anything back. It was about reclaiming something I had let go of a long time ago without even realizing it. My voice. My choice. My story. And for the first time in a very long time, I was living it out loud, whether Megan wanted to hear it or not.